A mercenary, bloodied and broken, knelt on the scorched earth, his voice trembling as he muttered bitterly. I know this name all too well. The incorrigible, violent recluse. The unhinged, boorish Cecil Perdium. His breathing was labored, his body barely holding itself together. How could I, one of the greatest mercenaries in the northern continent, fall to such a weakling? But Cecil, standing tall with the battlefield, remained impassive. His expression was cold, his eyes sharp as steel. I knew about your plan from the beginning, Cecil said. Not just your plan, but your spies, your suppliers, even the shadowy forces that funneled soldiers to your cause. The mercenary's eyes widened in disbelief. His mouth fell open. That's impossible. I never told anyone. As he began to spit out curses, hatred flooding his voice, Cecil calmly lifted his boot and pressed it down upon the man's face. Without a flicker of hesitation, he ended his life, crushing his skull underfoot. His voice, unwavering, echoed across the field. This war is mine to win. And not just this war, but every war that comes after, because I always have a plan. 1 year earlier, near the borders of the Perdium territory within the Kingdom of Lithania, a young boy bolted upright from his bed. His breath came fast, his hands trembling as he looked at them with disbelief. What's happening? He whispered. Am I alive? How could I still be alive? The fragments of his final moments came rushing back, his last battle, where he was utterly defeated. The man who had taken his life had looked him straight in the eye, declaring that by killing him, the strongest warrior on the continent, he had ended the war. That man had crouched beside him, asking coldly, "Any last words?" Cecil had looked back at him, blood dripping from his lips, and hissed through gritted teeth. My only regret is not seeing my revenge through to the end. Now go on. Kill me, you bastard. The man had flinched at Cecil's defiance, rage flaring in his expression. You really don't get it, do you? He said. You are the successor of the fallen House Perdium. I heard you left after your sister was killed. But how could someone from another kingdom know that? Cecil's eyes widened. The man smirked. Because I've been tracking you for quite some time. And I wasn't alone. Duke Delphine was with us all along. The realization struck Cecil like lightning. If Duke Delphine was involved, then there were others too, hidden forces behind the downfall of House Perdium. But the man just shook his head. No use telling you anything more. You'll be dead soon. And then, without letting him utter another word, he beheaded Cecil on the spot. Yet now, inexplicably, he was alive again, back in the Kingdom of Lithania, and young. He stumbled to the nearby barrel and looked into the water's reflection. A much younger face stared back. Could it be? He whispered. Was I brought back in time by a mage? Am I just a lab rat in some twisted spell experiment? He reached for the sword leaning beside the wall. As his fingers wrapped around the hilt, a surge of emotion hit him. I won't let them get away with this. Not again. Just then, the door burst open. A man strode in, tall, clad in armor. It was Ricardo, a loyal soldier of House Perdium. You ready to go? He asked gruffly. Cecil, caught off guard, instinctively raised the sword and placed it against Ricardo's throat. Explain yourself, he growled. Who are you really? Ricardo stared at him with an amused expression before laughing out loud. You're really pushing it today, Your Highness. Cecil frowned. What do you mean? You threw a tantrum before you fell asleep, Ricardo said, casually brushing the sword aside. You insisted on leading the vanguard against the orcs. Did you forget? Cecil was momentarily stunned. This calm, joking demeanor, it was so normal. Grab your gear, Ricardo added. We're heading back to the Kingdom of Perdium. Where else? Cecil's heart skipped a beat. Say that again. Ricardo repeated himself, and without waiting, Cecil ran outside. His eyes swept over the land, and what he saw left him breathless. The territory of House Perdium stood intact, the banners waving high in the breeze. But it was destroyed, he whispered. It was all gone. Ricardo raised a brow. Destroyed? We may be poor, but you shouldn't insult your own house like that. Your father would disown you on the spot. Still dazed, Cecil reached out and pinched his cheek. Pain. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Everything was back. The kingdom. The manor. His youth. It was the past. Memories rushed in. He had resented his family for being poor, throwing tantrums, and earning himself a disgraceful reputation. In time, his own family began avoiding him. Sick of it all, he abandoned Perdium and wandered the continent, eventually becoming one of the most feared mercenaries alive. He returned home years later to make amends, only to find his homeland in ruins. But now he had another chance. Cecil wanted to burst out laughing, but restrained himself. It was too early to celebrate. A sudden recollection sobered him. It was Ricardo's words. They were about to fight orcs. Back then, he had insisted on joining the troops meant to eliminate 3 reported orcs. But when they arrived, they found not 3, but dozens of them. The ambush had cost them dearly. Still, the orcs weren't strategists. With the knowledge he now possessed, they could win. Before he could dwell further, a metallic clash echoed nearby. Shouts rang out. Orcs were already upon them. Commander Skovan barked orders. Hold your ground. Take defensive formation. The soldiers obeyed, forming ranks. But then someone shouted, behind you. Cecil whirled around just in time to see a massive orc raising its weapon for a fatal blow. It was too late to evade. But in the blink of an eye, Cecil lunged forward, sword flashing in a series of precise slashes. In seconds, the beast collapsed, its body twitching in death. Gasps erupted around him. The soldiers stared in awe. Did he just? Someone murmured. Is he really Master Cecil? Cecil stood straight, blood staining his blade. He clenched his fist. I thought I wouldn't be able to use mana yet, but I can. He turned to Skovan, his voice calm, but commanding. You're the expedition commander, right? Hand over command. Skovan blinked. What? I said. Cecil repeated, eyes sharp with resolve. Hand it over. He asked Skovan to hand over command. Skovan immediately rejected the proposal, his voice firm and defiant. Can't you see our men are dying, he said. I would never relinquish the command entrusted to me by his lordship. Cecil, surprisingly, found that response agreeable. If a brat like him had asked for command, he wouldn't have given it either. Skovan, determined, declared that he would continue to lead the soldiers and turned away to press forward. But Cecil stopped him cold. Then you leave me no choice, he said, and hurled his sword, not at Skovan, but past him. The blade flew inches from Skovan's face. In a flash, he grabbed Cecil by the collar, his expression twisted in fury. What do you think you're doing? But then he turned and saw it. The sword hadn't been aimed at him. It had pierced clean through the vital point of an orc that had emerged from the shadows. The creature collapsed in a heap. Skovan's eyes widened. He couldn't comprehend the sudden change in Master Cecil. Even with all his years of battle experience, Skovan knew he couldn't have thrown a sword like that. Not with such deadly precision. Not right through the vitals. It was as if Cecil were some kind of master swordsman, but one with no mana. Where had this precision come from? It was beyond even his understanding. Cecil moved forward, his eyes locked on the enemy. With smooth, calculated slashes, he cut down one orc after another. As he fought, he called back to Skovan. Do you know how one wins a battle? It's not by cowering in fear. You need fighting spirit. With that, he charged ahead into the thick of battle, undaunted. After cleaving through several more orcs, Cecil mocked his enemies with a fierce grin. Is that all you've got? And you call yourselves a warrior breed? I'm just getting warmed up. Then, without warning, he turned and began to run. Skovan watched with alarm. The boy looked utterly exhausted just moments ago. He could barely stand, and now he was sprinting forward again. Cecil, meanwhile, was thinking, if Skovan was truly competent, he would realize what this maneuver was. Confusion spread among the ranks as everyone watched Cecil run, seemingly away from the battle. But Skovan's eyes sharpened. He wasn't just fleeing, he was running toward the cliff's edge. Suddenly, Skovan understood. Raise your shields and follow the orcs, he shouted. The others obeyed without hesitation. As Cecil glanced back and saw them coming behind the orcs, a smirk formed on his face. And then, at the last second, he jumped straight off the cliff. Several orcs, in pursuit, followed without thinking. As they fell, Skovan rushed to the cliff's edge and saw Cecil clinging to the side, hanging by the sword he had embedded into the rock. Grab my hand. Skovan yelled, reaching out. But Cecil, his body trembling and utterly spent from the earlier combat, looked up weakly and said, I can't move. His grip failed. And he fell. Memories struck him as he fell, visions of Elena. He saw her crying, heartbroken over their mother's death. He remembered her frustration with his cold behavior, how she scolded him, pleaded with him to listen, to care. He saw her eyes full of sadness as she begged him to accompany her. Someone was calling his name. Cecil's eyes blinked open. He sat up in bed, heart pounding, but the sharp ache throughout his body reminded him of reality. Pain radiated from every muscle. He must have pushed far beyond what his body could handle. As he tried to adjust, a familiar face came into view. It was Belinda. Belinda had been his tutor in childhood, always standing by him even when he made mistakes. After the fall of House Perdium, she had disappeared. He had never expected to see her again. Seeing her now brought a surge of emotion he hadn't felt in years. He jumped up and embraced her tightly, barely holding back tears. "I'm so glad to see you again," he whispered. "You see me every day," she said gently. Amused by his reaction, Cecil hesitated. He knew he needed to tell her the truth. "Belinda, House Purdium is in danger. We need to act." She tilted her head, puzzled. "How would you know that?" "Because," he hesitated, then spoke the words. "I died, and I came back. That's how I know." She laughed, light and carefree, brushing off his seriousness. "It's not the house you should be worried about. It's yourself that you think about. You were nearly killed by orcs. You should be resting. I'm just thankful you'll recover before the festival." He blinked. "Festival? Yes, it's in a week," she replied that in his past life, the festival had meant nothing to him. He had dreaded it, and festivities, mainly because the expedition had left him broken and isolated. But now, that memory returned with a cruel twist. In exactly a week, Elena would die. The worst part of that memory wasn't even her death. It was the moment when she had asked him, for the last time, to go to the festival with her. And he had refused. Suddenly, the door creaked open. "Cecil, are you in?" someone called. When Elena entered, he rushed toward her and hugged her enthusiastically. Belinda was beaming with joy, but Elena was visibly shocked. Cecil smiled and told her that he had missed her, but she immediately pushed him back and exclaimed that it was gross. Despite all this, she hadn't forgotten what he had done to her. She hadn't come to see him of her own accord. It was only because Belinda had asked her to. He tried to recall what he had done wrong, but his memory came up empty, until it suddenly clicked in his mind. That day he had told her to go away, that even her breath was annoying to him. It came crashing down on him. They weren't close, and now he realized just how much of a terrible brother he had been. The realization stung deeper than he expected. He took a step forward and sincerely apologized to her. Belinda's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Master Cecil apologizing. Elena leaned in and whispered into Belinda's ear, asking if he had been hit in the head when he was beaten up by the orcs. Mortified, Cecil quickly defended himself, saying that he had actually beaten the orcs. But Elena scoffed at him mockingly. "If you beat them, then why were you brought back on a stretcher?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Still, Cecil didn't mind. He was simply happy to see them again. They were always like this, playful and annoying, but this time, he wasn't looking past it. He remembered the festival from years ago, how Elena had begged him to accompany her. But he had been so weighed down by the failed expedition that he refused, leaving her to go alone. Later that day, her body had been found in the slums, alongside the corpses of her guards. That day had changed everything. It had been the turning point of his life. Just then, 2 guards entered the room, asking for Lady Elena. It was Jamal and Philip. She turned to them, frowning. "Didn't I tell you to wait outside?" she questioned sharply. "What's the matter now?" They informed her that she was needed to oversee the festival preparations. Cecil, surprised, turned to her. "Why are you the one handling the preparations?" Belinda sighed. "You were always too busy horsing around to notice, but our house has been in a difficult financial situation for years. As nobles, we have to handle the preparations ourselves. It just shows how little workforce we really have left." Elena nodded and turned to leave, telling Cecil to take care of himself. But before she could go, he suddenly offered to help. Both Belinda and Elena stared at him, stunned into silence. They were now absolutely sure that something really had hit his head. Out in the market, people stared openly at him, whispering among themselves. His presence drew murmurs and confusion, and Elena turned to him in irritation. "You're making everyone uncomfortable. You should leave," she said. But Cecil refused. He was determined to help, and more than that, he wanted to investigate who had dragged Elena to the slums. If he was to uncover the truth, he needed to look closely at everything happening within the castle, as Elena must have been lured or dragged forcefully into the slums by someone. Old Fergus soon approached, and upon seeing Cecil, his weathered face lit up with relief. Elena quickly interjected, telling Fergus that Cecil had just woken up and wasn't feeling well. "Could you take him back to his room?" she asked gently. The old man nodded, but Cecil spoke up. "Actually, can you take me to the training room?" Fergus agreed and led him there. As Cecil stepped into the chamber, he paused, taking in the sight of the well-equipped space. During his days as a mercenary, such a place had been beyond imagination. Fergus looked at him and said, "I always kept it maintained. Even when you were astray, I knew you'd return someday." Cecil was silent for a moment, then nodded. That meant The old man had never lost hope. "Live long," he said suddenly. "Dying is the worst." Fergus chuckled. "You talk like someone who's already died once." "I did," Cecil answered quietly. "And now I've come back." The old man laughed it off and left him to train. Cecil began working with discipline, focusing not only on his swordsmanship, but on regaining control over his mana. The secret behind his victories in his past life hadn't just been talent. It was a forbidden tome of magic that had taught him a technique to bring multiple manas into the core that all humans were born with. It had allowed him to summon immense power. He practiced the same technique now, and though he succeeded in channeling 3 cores, he couldn't yet reach the 4 he once had. A week passed. When the day of the festival arrived, Elena was surprised to see Cecil there. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she admitted. "And I heard you've been training all week." She tilted her head, looking at him curiously. He was nothing like the boy he used to be, the one who threw tantrums, who once even told their father that he was annoying and demanded his title be handed over to him. Cecil looked away, embarrassed by the memory. Together, they visited various stalls, enjoying the festivities. They laughed, ate, and wandered through the lively streets. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the past hadn't been entirely lost. Later, when the festival came to a close, they sat on the stone stairs, watching the night sky above them. Cecil's thoughts turned dark. The ones who had lured Elena to the slums still hadn't shown up. Was it because I was here? He wondered. Elena turned to him and smiled. "It was fun, but it's always the same. I want something new next time." As if on cue, her knights appeared, saying that something new had come up in the neighborhood. She could go check it out if she wished. Elena looked at them skeptically. "You two better hope it's fun, or you're getting blamed." All the while, Cecil stared at them silently. So it was these two who had lured her to the slums. The realization settled in his gut. They were the traitors. Jamal and Philip had been with Elena since she was a child, making them the most trusted guards of the kingdom. But their sudden decision to bring her to the slums raised suspicion. Something felt off. When they reached the area, they couldn't find anything resembling the promised performance. Frustrated, Elena looked around at the desolate surroundings and snapped. "I don't see anyone who could possibly perform here." Her voice was tense, brimming with unease. "They must be setting up for the performance. We just have to wait a little bit," Jamal replied casually, though his tone carried an unnatural calm that unsettled her further. She narrowed her eyes. "I don't even see anyone setting up anything," she shot back, her voice rising in alarm. Then, without waiting, she grabbed Cecil by the arm and muttered, "Let's go," pulling him away from the abandoned street, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. Cecil, who had been quietly observing the alleyways, glanced around once more, noting how even the exit was now blocked off. There was no one, no crowd, no stage, just silence. The implication was clear. This wasn't a detour. They had been lured here, and they were going to be killed. As Elena turned to leave, the guard stepped forward. "Why can't you just wait a bit?" Philip asked, but there was something odd, too calm, too detached, about the way he said it. Elena froze, her heart pounding. In a trembling voice, she asked, "Why are you acting so strange?" Jamal looked at her, not with guilt, but resignation. "We struck a deal." "A deal?" Elena's voice cracked, disbelief clouding her features. Just then, several men walked into the street, cloaked and ominous. Their presence turned the empty slum into a death trap. Among the cloaked men stood a familiar face, Frank. He glanced at the guards, his eyes narrowing. "I didn't strike a deal for the boy," he said, pointing towards Cecil. Jamal shrugged. "He followed on his own. No one asked him to, so we're handing him over too. He's dug his own grave." Cecil stepped forward, rage darkening his features. "You sold us out." His voice echoed down the alley. "Did you really think you'd get away with this?" Jamal didn't flinch. "We're done living in this gutter. We're leaving this good-for-nothing place behind, and you too are the price." His voice was venomous. "Worry about yourself." Without another word, Cecil moved like lightning. In a single fluid motion, he drew his blade and slashed through Jamal's torso, splitting him clean in two. Blood sprayed as Jamal collapsed to the ground. Dead before he could process what happened, Philip's eyes widened. "Jamal, you fool!" he shouted, drawing his sword and grabbing Elena roughly. How could a knight fall to such a weakling? But Cecil didn't give him the chance to speak further. He hurled a mana-infused sword straight into Philip's skull. The blade pierced through with surgical precision, and the knight dropped instantly, lifeless. Frank, observing from the sidelines, was stunned. "He's reckless and untrained in combat," he thought. "At least, that's what I've always heard." "So how How could he take down 2 fully trained knights in seconds? His eyes narrowed. And he's using mana, too. Elena ran to Cecil, arms wrapping tightly around him. What's happening? She cried. He looked at her with sorrow and whispered, I'm sorry. Then, before she could react, he struck the side of her neck, making her lose consciousness. Gently, he lowered her to the ground. Cecil turned to face the remaining threat. 3 enemies, he calculated. The ones on the sides are easy to handle. But the one in the middle, he's well protected and surrounded by mana. I'll take the flanks first. Frank interrupted his thoughts. You've saved me some effort. They were going to kill you anyway. Cecil didn't look at him. It doesn't matter, he muttered coldly. Who sent you? It doesn't matter either, Frank smirked. You're going to die in a minute. One of the men beside Frank stepped forward and asked, Should I kill him? Frank shook his head. No, keep him alive. Then dice him down slowly. Make his father go mad with grief. The man stepped forward and pulled out a firecracker-like explosive, aiming it towards Cecil. But Cecil was ready. He slashed the device in 2 before it ignited, then lunged forward and cut the man down with a single strike. The other flanker came charging in next, launching his own attack with sharp movements and dodging Cecil's strikes. But he was no match. Cecil anticipated every motion and, after a series of rapid clashes, decapitated him cleanly. Frank, who had been watching closely, finally made his move. Hidden by the shadows, he launched an ambush from behind, but Cecil blocked it just in time. Frank's eyes widened in admiration. The fight broke out between them, swift and ferocious. Frank shielded himself with thick, condensed mana, creating a barrier most couldn't breach. But Cecil was relentless, his attacks unnaturally forceful, as though powered by something more than just mana. He broke through Frank's defense and slashed his throat. Frank recoiled just in time, saving himself from decapitation by reinforcing the mana around his head. If I hadn't protected my neck, Frank realized, I'd lose my head by now. He's reckless, and his style is unrefined, but one thing is certain. He turned to Cecil and said, You're going to die today.